Well, hello. Can you hear me?
Hi. Yes, I can. How are you?
I'm doing good. How about you?
Good, thank you. Well, I'm so glad we got to chat today.
Me too. Thank you so much for being open and joining me. I always love
Yes.
collaborating. It's fun.
Yes.
It's absolutely wonderful to finally connect with you virtually. I've been following you on LinkedIn and I really admire the way that you empower women. It's inspiring. There's not a
Oh,
lot of women out there that are willing to help us all, a gal out, as I should say.
yes. Oh, well, that's so kind. And I'm glad that we connected on LinkedIn. And now that we're here and chatting together, I think it's a lot of fun.
That's fantastic to hear. I feel the same way. So, my focus is really on helping people to reprogram their limiting beliefs and then access their inner potential through hypnosis techniques, of course, along with NLP, which is neuro linguistic programming. So, for our listeners, Erin, your work centers around empowering women, embracing their authentic selves, stepping into their power. Can
Yes.
you tell me a little bit more about how you got started with that?
So, ever since I was little, I have thought about being a therapist. And, as time goes along, it's like you begin to niche down more and more because you're s- seeing more problems. But it really spoke to my heart that I wanted to be the therapist that I wish I always had,
Yeah.
like because growing up, I mean, I went through some abuse stuff and then going into relationships, especially, I was like a hot mess. And it really wasn't until I met my husband and just having that unconditional love that things really started to click for me. And then getting into my work as a therapist, I noticed there were a lot of women, especially, who were having anxiety. And I put it in air quotes because OCD is a different level of anxiety. And
Yeah.
OCD stands for Obsessive-Compulsive Disorder. And it's like when you get in these loops and these spirals and you kind of get stuck in this pattern for so long. And the traditional therapy methods don't work. So I went out and researched and read books, and now I'm here like 13, 14 years later, specializing in OCD. And I especially have a heart for relationship OCD because we're all designed for relationships and connection. So I just find it to be very important and also very empowering whenever women find that clarity in love.
That's such a beautiful mission, and you so clearly defined it. I love that
Mhm.
you are very passionate about what you do and have a really secure sense of what it is that you feel is your purpose. That's
Yes.
not always easy for people to find.
No, no. And even just kind of clearing all the noise and distractions and just being really intentional with what I value because that's what I teach my clients. And I also apply it to my life as best as I can. I mean, I'm human too, but that really gives me a sense of fulfillment. And just staying true to your values is what I teach my clients all the time.
I love that because yeah, as you mentioned, there's so many women that they just struggle, I think, with feeling like they're not enough despite all of their achievements. And that
Yes.
mainly stems from what we see in society and what is pushed, you have to look your best and feel your best at all times and be perfect in front of the camera if you're on social media.
Yes, 100%. And then where I'm from in North Carolina, there's a lot of emphasis for a woman to be, and I'm sure it happens all over the world, but it seems like the Southern girls, like you've got to be nice, kind, sweet, and polite. And it's like, oh gosh, shut up. And
Yeah.
so if you have these angry feelings or you're bitter or you want to stand up for yourself, you're like told, no, don't do that. That's not ladylike. And I just love to call it out and empower women and be like, no, anger is a valid emotion. you know? And so it feeds into that whole self worth of like, I must be doing something wrong if I'm angry. No, girl, it's okay to be angry.
Yes. Is there any ways that you can encourage women who may still be a little bit more shy in voicing their opinions and really fostering that strength to speak out? Is there any tips you would give them to kind of start the process of changing that dynamic?
Yes. Well, I would say it's very hard to do it alone, because you really need that cheerleader in your corner or a community of like minded women to help up level and upgrade your life. So that's where I would start first is be around a woman or a group of women that you aspire to become.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now that's empowering.
Mhm.
Networking can be your best friend to finding those women.
Yes, 100%. And that's also why I'm starting a group coaching program just around relationship OCD because community is so important. And not only because it's like bonding and connecting, but you get to learn from other people, you feel validated, and you stay accountable to the goals. So,
Absolutely. And it's such a fantastic idea that you came up with creating this space, especially for OCD. It's nothing that I really hear too much about anymore, but that's just because I'm not exposed to individuals from many different areas and walks of life, so to speak. I have my little group that I consistently work with. And unless I'm connecting with other individuals outside of that group, I just don't get the opportunity to meet people who are different.
yeah, and OCD work is very unique. It doesn't follow the traditional therapy methods, like as far as exposure response prevention or even inference based cognitive behavioral therapy. Like it's all very different. And OCD, like it's missed almost 50% of the time. So,
I've heard of some of those shocking statistics. What
mm-hmm.
do you think that is, that it's missed so often?
Yeah, so with women especially, like, have you ever been to the doctor and like you really feel like something's wrong and they say it's just anxiety?
Yes,
Yes, like
that's so many times.
yes, when you may actually be struggling with like health OCD, for example. But what a lot of I would say like healthcare related or just general public, but they don't get an accurate perception of OCD. They think it's only hand washing, organizing, cleaning, like those type of themes. But in actuality, like OCD is a shapeshifter and it can take so many forms. And of all the themes, relationship OCD is the most distressing, according to the research.
But do you mind me asking what makes it so distressing and what the differences are?
So now, with the research and with what I'm seeing, it just creates the most problems because, I mean, for example, like there are single ladies out there who would love to have a family by now, but
Mhm.
they're so scared to even take the first step because how do I know I found the one? How do I know I'm going to love him? How do I know he's going to love me? Am I enough? Right? So they're very stuck in their head and they've got all these false narratives that really limits them. So in that example, when you're alone, like you have all sorts of mental health complications and distress. So because of the relationships, it's just such a ripple effect across your life.
I see. That makes so much sense. I
Mhm.
mean, in hypnosis, I come across many different individuals that get stuck in the same kind of a loop. So that's relatable for sure. So, what
Mhm.
would you say would be the first step to helping women who are afraid to take that first step forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, in taking the first step, once you are in that community with a group of ladies, um, it's very important. And I've got a whole framework. I call it the peace method, where we
Oh,
practice skills, we work on empowerment, also being aware of your thoughts, and then being content with your life, and finally, looking at the evidence. And so, the first thing in being aware of the evidence, that's a key part because we all experience doubts, like we all do. And the difference between a normal doubt and doubts from someone who has OCD is that even if you have the information you need to clear your doubt, you still don't believe it. So
right.
we call that an obsessional doubt. So for that person, I would encourage them to be aware of the evidence, the here and now evidence, like kind of like a court case. Like you can only prove something with evidence. And likely, once they start doing these exercises, they will notice that there's not any evidence to support this narrative of am I enough? There, girl, you
It's a
got
big
plenty of
shift.
evidence saying you are enough.
Right.
Yeah, I would say pay attention to the evidence because that is going to be your key factor, and you can detect it with your five senses. So that's how we know it's evidence.
That's such a great point. And I actually love that you brought up the senses because um, intuition is something that I try to encourage individuals to tap into just to be a little bit more self aware so that you're listening to your internal dialogue. Is that something that you also encourage women to do in your practice?
Yes. Now, my inner work looks different in that we are determining which voice is yours and which voice is the OCD. So we make a distinction. And the way we make that distinction is the OCD voice, when it comes in, it stresses you out.
I see.
And yeah, and it's unwanted and involuntary, meaning you weren't thinking of it on purpose.
Right. So it's
Mhm.
more of that subconscious dialogue driving the conscious behavior.
Yes, perfectly said.
Well, that's so intriguing. I could talk about this all day, but
Oh, yeah.
I do want to learn just a little bit more about you personally, if you don't mind sharing. Is
Sure.
there any funny stories that you have from childhood growing up, or just any memorable stories that you can think of that really encouraged you to become a person that helps other people?
Ah, well, currently I am married for 15 years, almost 16 now,
Great.
and got three boys. So it's a busy life. But before I became a mom, through my childhood and it was a rough go because I definitely dealt with self-esteem issues and loneliness and all sorts of thoughts now, and looking back was likely relationship OCD. And in one of my first serious relationships in high school, right? Like it's not even all that serious, but it feels super serious at the time.
So does.
Yeah, I spent way, way, way too long in a relationship because of all those built up narratives of, what if I don't find someone else? What if this is it?
Right.
And I remember vividly, like we were driving down the highway. I mean, we dated for 4 years, mind you.
That
So,
is a long time.
yes, a lot of wasted time. And I also thought to myself, well, I've already put in this much time. Might as well try to make it work. And that's what, relationship OCD ladies experience all the time because they feel like they've already invested so much and like it's just another hook and play to stay stuck.
Right.
And anyhow, so we were driving down the highway. And do you like country music?
I do. I like all
Okay.
kinds of music.
Okay. So Rascal Flatts, comes on the radio and they're playing the song My Wish.
Hmm.
And the chorus is playing, and the chorus goes, my wish for you is that this life becomes all that you want it to. And then later on in the chorus is that I hope you know that somebody loves you and wants the same things too. And so that got my mind turning. All of a sudden, I was like, huh. So I looked over at him and I said, do you think we want the same things? And he was like, yeah, I think so. I think so. I'm like, what do you think that is? You know what he said?
What was
He was
it?
like, well, I think we'll live together and see how it goes. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we have been together 4 years and you still don't know that, like, we're going to make this thing work. And I was like, no. So that was like the push I needed to stop and end the relationship. Like, that was the last day I saw him.
Good for you.
Thank you. Yeah, and shortly after that, I met my husband, and it's been a very different story from there because I decided I was going to be with someone who had the same goals and dreams and growth mindset. So that was important to me, and I desire to bring it to other women too.
Well, that's pretty incredible that you decided that at such a young age, too, because well, let me tell you, some of us are not so mature to be able to reflect back on our emotions and what we want long term in life, especially at a younger age like that. Do you feel that there's maybe something in your childhood that drove you to be a little bit more mature in that way or to think a little bit more maturely?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, cuz with the abuse that I went through, I knew from an early age I had to get out and I had to be smart about it. And there wasn't going to be anyone going with me. Like I had to do this on my own. And that's probably a trauma response because as a trauma survivor, like when you're in the thick of it, like there's a point where you're like, no one's going to take care of me but me.
Yeah.
But I was also kind of mixed up with this relationship OCD stuff of thinking I may never find a partner. And anyway, so in growing up, I saw education as a way out. And I just really valued my education. And I knew that I was going to pursue college, if not master's degree, which I did. And that was going to be my way to make money and be self sufficient even though, in my adulthood, I still had a lot of things to work out and like to go to therapy and work on all the things and do EMDR and whew, it was it was a lot. And I feel like it was a great path and the therapy was a very beneficial part to closing that chapter, if you will.
That's amazing that you were so resilient at that time.
Thank
'Cause
you.
wow, it's just incredible that you got to a point where you were like, okay, enough is enough. I'm the only one that's going to change this for myself. So I can either wallow in it or succeed. And you chose the path to succeed.
Yes, absolutely. And even though on the inside I was, struggling emotionally and self esteem, I just knew if I kept going, I would eventually feel better. Like the payoff will come. I know. And then once I was having success with school or, success in a job or whatever, and even starting my own business now, that little piece of confidence continued to grow over time. And I try to give that kudos and attention and acknowledging that I'm going to make it okay. Like there are things within my control that I can ensure it's all going to work out.
And I really would like to raise awareness of the point that you're making right now, because what myself and my personal little coaching community does is inspire individuals to be resilient. And we compare what the resilient mindset looks like.
Ooh.
So yours is a perfect example of that. We see
Thank
that
you.
many individuals who are raised in abusive environments or environments that are geared more towards negative experiences,
Mhm.
those individuals adapt negative mindsets. So they're not as optimistic as you would hope them to be,
Right.
unless something triggers them to say, like you, I don't want to be here forever. I'm going to choose to look at this situation in a better light so that I can crawl out of it.
Yes.
So
Yes.
is there any way that you would suggest a woman to try and stay positive in those circumstances to be able to foster that resilient attitude and move forward?
Yeah, I love that question because, I've also, as a podcast host myself, I listen to other podcasts and I've heard the discussions on like toxic positivity and all these things. And I can totally identify with that because if you're optimistic in a way that invalidates your feelings, like that's not going to be helpful. But
Right.
for me, I think it really goes back to your values and your value system because that's like your North Star. And so if you know what you value, and you can find all sorts of, exercises with different coaches and therapists that specialize in value based systems, but really identifying with those things that light you up because that's what's going to bring you joy at the end of the day. And if you're doing the best you can to stay in alignment with those values, all those other things are going to start to fall away because you're naturally going to say no because you're saying yes to the things that you value.
Such a great point. And thank you for sharing that perspective. I love to hear that you're such a boss
Oh,
and
thank
you've
you.
taken control over what you are going to allow into your life. And you're choosing to dictate it and run it, which is
Yes,
so important.
right. Because even in the, seasons of my life where like the PTSD was really strong,
Mhm.
I chose to not go back to the places where I was reminded of my abusers. And like, I know some therapists would say, oh, you're avoiding or whatever, but I really saw it as an empowered choice of like, I'm not going to trigger my mental health in that way. Like, going back to those places doesn't serve me nor my energy or my family, So I'm protecting my peace and I'm just not going to go to those places.
I very much respect that because I've had similar circumstances in my life as well when I was growing up.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I had to do to get through it. Instead of me saying, I'm just gonna, ignore this and maybe deal with it later, I chose to say, if I give this any attention and I let this individual affect me more than they already have,
Mm-hmm.
that's just giving them the power to ruin me that much more. So
Yeah.
why am I going to put my attention on even worrying about that when I
Oh,
can
yeah.
choose to move forward and show them they didn't destroy me?
Oh, yeah. And that's from an empowered place too.
Absolutely. So I can totally relate to you with that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It's
thank you for
important.
sharing that. It can be really difficult to visit some past experiences that are traumatizing. So I do appreciate you opening up and sharing that.
Yeah, and it's good to share these things to hopefully bring not only awareness, but more women to a place of recognizing that healing is possible, empowerment is possible, and that life can be different. So,
Definitely. That's a powerful message.
mhm.
I feel like we have covered so much in such a little bit of time,
Awesome.
but I do want to ask you just one more question if you don't mind.
Sure.
what is one last piece of advice that you would give any woman out there today that maybe are facing OCD or any other kind of circumstance or situation?
Mhm. Yeah, you know, this is something that I have wrestled with in my own life, of course, because I feel like as a therapist and coach, no matter which hat I'm wearing, I'm trying to bring value to my clients in a way that I wish I had this advice or this experience, to help
Yeah.
bring healing and whatnot. So it's actually two different things. First of all, the whole like perfectionism situation. Like, I have now reframed that as being high achieving. And like, yes, of course, if there were endless amounts of resources or time, like, yeah, you would get an A plus 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 on your
Right.
assignment, but recognize that you're human and you need to be kind to yourself and understand the limitations that you have as far as time or obligations to kind of slow down that high achieving stuff. And like, you're already awesome, so just recognize the value and the worth that you have, and you don't have to prove yourself to anyone. And
Right.
yeah, the second thing is a term called that I call comparisonitis. Yeah, so it's just that like doom scrolling that we do on Instagram or Facebook of either comparing ourselves or our relationships,
Yeah.
to other people. And, first of all, like, don't compare your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 100. Like, I've learned that in the business world. But then on top of that, your relationship has a lot of strengths and a lot of unique qualities. And to shift your perspective on those things versus like, oh gosh, well, so and so got a big rock for their engagement and they did this whole grand proposal with roses and music and blah blah blah. Like, mine wasn't that nice. No, yours was special and you loved it, you know, or just remember the unique qualities about your relationship and don't go too far down that path of comparisonitis, because that comparison is going to be the thief of your joy in your relationship. So,
Yes.
to be
And
mindful
I
of
love
that.
that you gave a definition and a name to this.
Yes. I've been there, and you have to monitor why you're on social media and how, like the why and the how. Like, how are you spending your time on social media? So, at this current stage of my life, it's informative, like maybe I'm researching client, like customer information, or it's intentional in the sense of keeping up with my friends, like the ones I want to connect with.
Great. You have
Mhm.
intention in everything that you choose to do. And I think that that's
Yes.
also something that we can leave our audience with today is make sure that you're intentional with where you're spending your time, what you're doing, and is it serving you?
Yes. Yes, exactly.
Well, thank you again, Erin, so much for joining me and sharing your words of wisdom. I feel like I've learned so much from you today.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sabrina, for having me.
Absolutely. So, Erin, can you share with our audience today where they can find you?
Absolutely. So the audience can find me on YouTube at Erin Davis YouTube, also on Instagram at Erin Davis Coaching, and both of those are spelled ERIN. I'm also on LinkedIn at Erin Davis if they want to find me there.
Perfect. And I will make sure to outline all of that information in the comments section below the video. So, everybody, please make sure to check that out and get in touch with Erin if you need anything, especially if you're looking for some coaching or guidance in handling some of the challenges that you're going through.
Thank you.
Thank you, Erin.